It is Monday, and this is the Build Log. I am Maki, and this is the Market Desk, which means we are looking at the week in front of us rather than the week behind us.
And I am Kai. There is one date on the board this week that everything else bends around.
Wednesday. Nvidia reports. It is being described across the financial press as the week's must-watch event for global markets. And I want to spend the episode on why a single earnings date gets that billing.
Because it is not really an earnings date anymore. It has turned into a referendum.
On what, specifically?
On whether the last 2 years of spending were a purchase or a bet. And those are very different things to have on a balance sheet.
Let us set the board first. 3 things are scheduled or already reported, and then we will talk about the question underneath all 3.
Item 1 is Wednesday.
Nvidia's quarter. Reported context going in. Hyperscalers have continued to raise their AI infrastructure budgets, and Nvidia's chips have remained the default choice. Analysts expect another quarter of outsized growth.
And I want to flag the word expect there because it is doing a lot of work, and it is not a fact about the world.
It is not. Expectation is a statement about what analysts have modeled. The result is a statement about what happened. This week, those 2 things meet, and they do not always agree.
Item 2, and this one has already happened.
Alibaba launched a share placement of 80 billion Hong Kong dollars. That is about 10.2 billion US, and it is earmarked for AI development across 3 areas: chips, infrastructure, and model development.
Reported, and here's the detail that I think matters more than the headline number. The offering was increased after strong investor demand.
Which is a fact about appetite rather than a fact about AI. Somebody wanted to put more money in than was originally on offer.
It has been described as potentially the largest ever primary follow-on offering by a Hong Kong-listed company. That is a size record in a financing market, not a technology milestone, and those get conflated constantly.
Item 3. Teradyne reported record second quarter results. Revenue more than doubled year over year. Earnings per share grew over 300%. The reported driver is demand for AI chip testing.
Testing, not chips. Testing.
Testing! Why that distinction is the interesting part.
Because Teradyne does not sell you the AI. It sells the machines that check whether the chips came out of the factory working. It is about as far down the pick and shovel chain as you can go and still be in the story.
And a doubling there is a different signal from a doubling at a model company.
Completely different. A model company doubling could be one enormous contract. A test equipment company doubling means physical volume moved. Somebody actually made a great many more chips.
That is the part that is hard to fake, and it is why I keep an eye further down the chain than the names everybody watches.
Although I will put one caution on my own point, because I like it too much, and that is usually a warning sign.
Go on.
A year-over-year doubling tells you about the comparison as much as the quarter. If the same quarter last year was weak, doubling it is a smaller achievement than it sounds. I do not have that base in front of me, so I am not going to pretend the multiple is the whole story.
Noted. And that is the honest version. Now, the actual subject of the episode, which is not any of those 3 items.
It is the question they are all being measured against.
Reported this year, Wall Street's focus has shifted from training cluster buildout to inference efficiency and AI agent monetization.
Translate that, because it is a sentence made almost entirely of jargon.
Training is what you do to create a model. It is enormous, it happens in a concentrated burst, and it needs a very large cluster of chips in one place.
Inference is what happens every time somebody uses the model afterwards. Smaller per event, but it happens constantly and forever.
So the shift in focus is a shift from the cost of building the thing to the cost and the revenue of running it.
which is the moment any infrastructure story has to grow up. You can raise money on a buildout. You cannot raise money on a buildout indefinitely.
Not indefinitely. And that is why Wednesday is a referendum rather than a report. The number itself will be large. Everyone already assumes the number will be large.
So the number is not the news.
The number is not the news. What is said about the composition of it is the news.
Give people something concrete to listen for, because otherwise this stays abstract.
Listen for whether demand is being described as training demand or inference demand. Those are both revenue, and they are not the same business.
Because training demand is lumpy. A customer builds a cluster, and then that customer is done for a while.
Inference demand is recurring. It scales with usage rather than with construction. A company whose revenue is shifting toward inference is a company whose revenue looks more like a subscription and less like a series of very large one-off orders.
And that changes what the revenue is worth, not just what it is.
It does. Recurring revenue is valued differently from lumpy revenue by every method anyone uses, and that is a structural fact rather than an opinion about this company.
Second thing to listen for.
Concentration. How much of the revenue comes from a small number of very large customers?
Which is the risk nobody enjoys discussing when things are going well.
Nobody enjoys it. If a handful of hyperscalers are the bulk of demand, then the supplier's outlook is really a bet on those specific buyers continuing to spend. That is a supply chain with very few load-bearing points.
And every one of those buyers is running the same internal argument about whether their own AI spending is earning its keep.
Which is the loop. The buyers are being asked what it earns, and their answer determines whether they keep buying, and that determines the supplier's next quarter.
So the question has propagated all the way down the chain, and it arrives at a test equipment company in the end.
Third thing to listen for, and this is the one I would rank highest.
Which is?
Any language about inference efficiency, because efficiency cuts both ways for a chip seller, and I have not seen many people say that out loud.
Explain, because the instinct is that efficiency is straightforwardly good.
If inference becomes dramatically cheaper per query, you need fewer chips for the same amount of work. That is a headwind.
But cheaper inference also means more things become worth doing at all.
And that is a tailwind. So efficiency is simultaneously a threat to unit demand and an expansion of the market, and which one dominates is genuinely unresolved.
That is the most honest thing we will say today. Nobody knows that answer, including the people with the most money riding on it.
Nobody knows. Now let us connect this to where we have been the last two episodes, because this is the third leg of the same arc.
Episode 32 was the spending, the capital going in.
Episode 33 was the agents actually running in production, holding credentials, doing work.
And this week is the market asking what those two things add up to.
Which is why the phrase agent monetization appearing in the shift is worth pausing on. Last week, we established that agents are deployed at scale. 70% of enterprises reported agents running in production.
Deployed is not the same as monetized, though.
It is not, and that gap is the whole question. An agent that is running is a cost. An agent that is running and replacing a more expensive process is a return.
And the surveys we went through last week counted deployments. They did not measure returns.
Nobody has published a clean measure of returns, which is exactly why the market has started asking. When a question moves from the technology press to the earnings call, it is because the easy phase ended.
Can I raise the Alibaba item again? Because I think it complicates the tidy version of this story.
Please.
If the market has genuinely moved from build-out to returns, then a $10 billion raise specifically to fund chips and infrastructure is the old question getting funded, and it just got upsized on demand.
That is a fair tension, and I do not think it resolves cleanly.
So do not resolve it. Say both. Say
Emotional
both.
damage.
Both, then. Western market commentary has moved toward returns, and capital is still being raised at record size for buildout, in a different market, with demand strong enough to increase the offering.
Which might mean the shift is regional rather than global, or that a company still early in its buildout is at a different point on the same curve.
Or that market commentary and capital allocations simply disagree right now, which happens more often than either side admits afterwards.
I want to say the unglamorous thing about Wednesday as well.
Go ahead.
It is 1 quarter. Whatever it says, it is 13 weeks of a business, reported by the business, on a schedule the business controls.
And it will be treated for about 48 hours as though it settled an argument that it cannot settle.
The reported context going in is that AI stocks have been sliding, and that Wall Street is, in the usual phrase, holding its breath, which tells you about positioning, not about the result.
That distinction matters more than almost anything else this week, so let us be precise. A market that has already fallen ahead of a result has partly priced a disappointment in.
Which means the reaction is a comparison against expectation, not against zero. A good result can be met with a fall. A weak one can be met with relief.
And if you are watching the price to learn whether the technology is working, you are reading the wrong instrument. The price is measuring the distance between the result and what was already assumed. The wrong instrument.
Now the honest part. What do we not know?
We do not know the result. It has not been reported. Everything before Wednesday is expectation, and we have labeled it as expectation every time.
We do not know the composition of the Alibaba spend beyond the 3 stated areas, and chips, infrastructure, and models is a wide description that could mean very different mixes.
We do not know Teradyne's comparison base, as Kai flagged, so we are treating the doubling as directional, rather than as a precise measure of how much silicon moved.
And we do not know whether the shift toward inference and monetization is a durable change in how this industry is judged, or a mood that lasts until the next impressive demonstration.
That last one is the one I would most like to be able to answer, and it will take more than 1 week to know.
So what would actually change our minds? Because a view that cannot be falsified is not a view, it is a slogan.
First, if Nvidia's commentary this week is weighted toward inference demand rather than cluster construction, that is evidence the shift is real and is already showing up in what customers buy.
Second, if more large raises follow the Alibaba pattern, at size, explicitly for build-out, then the build-out question is not closed, and the returns framing is premature.
Third, watch the test and equipment layer through the next 2 quarters. If Teradyne and its peers keep posting volume-driven growth, physical production is still climbing, regardless of what the commentary says.
And fourth, the one I would actually pay for. The first credible, published measure of what deployed agents return, rather than how many are deployed.
That figure does not exist yet. When somebody publishes it, this stops being a question about sentiment and becomes a question with an answer.
And we will cover it the day it lands.
Every figure in this episode is either already reported or explicitly labeled as expectation, and we have named which is which throughout, rather than blending them into a single confident story.
And nothing here is advice about what to do with money. We do not do that, we are not qualified to do that, and a market desk that starts doing it stops being a market desk.
What we do is describe what is scheduled, what the numbers mean structurally, and where the honest uncertainty sits.
Which this week is a lot of places, and that is not a failure of the reporting. That is the actual state of the question.
So that is the week. Wednesday is the date everything bends around. And the thing to listen for is not the size of the number, because the number will be large and everyone already knows it will be large.
Listen for what the revenue is made of: training or inference, concentrated or spread, one-off or recurring. That is the composition question, and it is the one that tells you which business you are actually looking at.
And hold the whole thing loosely, because it is one quarter, reported by one company, on a schedule that company controls, and it is going to be treated as though it answered a question far larger than it can.
We will be back on Wednesday, on the other side of it, to talk about what was actually said rather than what was expected.
Thank you for watching the Build Log, and whatever Wednesday turns out to say, we will be here to tell you what it actually means, rather than what it was expected to mean.